Hello, everyone. I'm Hector Del Castillo, Chief Product Officer at BoldPM. I'd like to welcome all of you to today's discussion. Today's topic is 5 steps to greater product agility. And we're going to be discussing today why agility is important and why it's so important, not just for your product, but for your entire organization, and why many leading organizations have been implementing lean agile methodologies in order to remain relevant in the marketplace. Before we get started, I actually want to give a shout out to the entire organizing committee for this virtual project management symposium. It's a great first of its kind type of event, a 2-day event, and I'm really glad that I was able to be invited and be able to be here today for this particular discussion. I also want to point out that we're going to be covering quite a bit of material, but we're also going to have a Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So feel free to type in your questions via the chat so that we can get to them, and we would have a few minutes to have moderated questions that the moderator will ask. So let's talk about specifically today's discussion, and we're going to be covering the following. We're going to be covering the trends and challenges that are plaguing product organizations, product teams, and their organizations. We're also going to be discussing 5 steps to boost your agility, specifically when it comes to your product and your product portfolio. And also, we're going to have the Q&A, so be sure to type in any questions you might have, anything that you want me to cover, and I will make sure that I cover that information as time allows. So let's talk about current situation. First of all, let's give this particular definition. Business resilience. It's a term that you hear pretty much everywhere when you're looking at business literature. What exactly is it? Well, my definition is that it's an organization's ability to rapidly adapt and respond to business disruptions while safeguarding its people and assets and maintaining continuous operations of its core business functions. So this is what everybody tries to do, is to become more and more resilient, because as things happen that is outside of their control, whether it's a market or the environment, the ecosystem, they want to be able to continue operating so that they can continue to have the right cash flow and also achieve the right business objectives. So with that, you also have heard a lot about resilience versus anti-fragility. Now, here's how you relate to that. When you're a startup, you end up being in a very fragile environment, mostly because you're learning and discovering things that no one in the organization knows. You're doing a lot of discovery and trying new things for the first time. And therefore, there's a lot of things where you need to kind of build over time consistency. And as the company grows, it becomes more robust by being able to figure out what processes, what systems, what tools, and how to make repeatable processes so that no matter who's involved, you can consistently deliver the same outcomes. It's the natural flow and life cycle of most companies as they grow. So they become more robust. Well, resilience is actually being able to increase that level of robustness that you have achieved over time by growing the company. And eventually you want to get to the anti-fragile state. Now, anti-fragile state is really a theoretical limit. So let's be clear. There are no companies today that are anti-fragile, but it's a theoretical limit that allows you to kind of find out what it will be like that as you build more resilience into your organization, that you're going to be able to withstand things that you don't foresee or you don't anticipate or you don't expect to happen that often, but maybe high impact and low probability of occurrence. And you want to make sure that at least you maintain your business operations while these events happen in real time. So to kind of compare and contrast the different states and summarize, fragile is when you start, basically when you're a startup, right? A brand new company that has trying new things and doing a lot of discovery, very few repeatable processes are in place, and mostly doing a lot of new processes to try to get repeatable outcomes. As the company grows, it becomes robust. And now you're able to withstand certain things that are high likelihood and also high probability of occurring and reoccurring. And then you're able to ensure that you're safeguarding your people and your assets and continuing to operate your business as usual. As you build up resilience, you're getting to that anti-fragile theoretical limit. And you want to make sure that you're covering all those things as your company grows and as it scales. You want to make sure that also you're increasing the organizational resilience so that you can actually withstand any force, even if there's low likelihood but high impact. You want to be able to still be able to continue your business operations. So business agility is actually one of those things that you need in order to actually get to higher resilience. And here's the 4 attributes of increasing agility within any organization. Number 1, you're going to be able to make adjustments to your strategies on a continuous basis. It's a continuous process of planning and executing and planning and executing and planning and executing as you go. And also, you're able to make better decisions faster because you already have anticipated or at least planned what is your actions, what are your actions when something happens that you have already thought about the what if scenarios. And also you're able to respond with flexibility and speed. So make the ability to make not just quick decisions, but also ensure that you're getting the best results possible. Maintain your business operations. And number 4, view change as a growth opportunity. Most organizations that are looking for opportunities out there know that whenever there's any changes in the market, changes in the ecosystem, change in buyer customer behavior, those usually will create opportunities. And so you want to create a culture within your organization and a systematic approach of always looking for that silver lining whenever a storm occurs. And you want to be able to do this on an ongoing basis. These are the 4 attributes of becoming more agile within any organization. And also, agility has to do with the amount of dynamic versus stable practices that you have within your organization. And often, as companies grow, they will continue to introduce new processes. And as those processes continue to work, and the environment doesn't change very much, or there's not many changes happening in the industry, those processes and practices become stable. And over time, you may be in an environment that you may be with mostly stable practices and very few dynamic practices. And we're going to find out that that's not exactly the right mix. An agile organization is one that has the right balance between stable practices and dynamic practices. Take a look at this particular study that was actually published by McKinsey in 2017. They actually did a global survey of CEOs of companies, and they stated their level of agility based on the number of stable practices and dynamic practices that they have within their organizations. And what came out was that the responses could be divided, put organizations into any of these 4 quadrants that you see here. When you have a low amount of dynamic practices, you can be either in the trapped quadrant or in the bureaucratic quadrant. When you have a low number of stable practices, you can be either in the trapped or the startup mode. And it's only when you have a high number of both stable practices as well as dynamic practices that you have a truly agile organization. In other words, organizations that become more agile will continue to practice stable practices when no changes are needed in those practices, but continue to test and improve to develop new and improved dynamic practices that become stable over time to get the right business outcomes. And this is what the study showed. So take a look and tell me, which of these states do you believe your organization is today? Are you in the trap state? Are you in the bureaucratic state? Are you in the startup mode? Or are you truly agile today based on the number of stable practices versus dynamic practices? Here are the results from the McKinsey report. Only 22% of CEOs reported that they feel their organizations are agile based on the number of stable practices and dynamic practices that are being performed within their organizations. So take a look at this. The majority, more than 50% of respondents, are either trapped or bureaucratic. And these are established multinational organizations. And a few that almost a third, 28%, that are startup mode. So trying to get to the agile state is extremely hard, especially when you're a multinational organization, because usually the more employees and the more locations that you have, the longer it takes to actually achieve the agile state that you really need to be to actually work positively for your business, but also to make sure that whatever practices you have stick for the long term, especially the stable practices. So let's take a look also at what happened post-COVID-19. Here are 10 challenges that product organizations faced in 2020, and many of them are still trying to recover because many of these things that happened in 2020 are still lingering well beyond 2021, and many of these organizations will take well into 2022 to get back to where they were before the beginning of the pandemic. So tell me in the chat, which one of these have you experienced? And you can just type in the numbers, one through 10, any combination of these, because my guess is that most of you are experiencing multiple of these factors, not just one, multiple. And this is what the pandemic represented to many different types of organizations. So are you experiencing, number one, delayed or lost sales revenue? Have you seen or have seen cancellations and lost customers? Number two. Number three, are you seeing changing customer needs and priorities? Number four, are you seeing changing dynamics for customer interactions? Number five, disrupted product launches. Number six, delayed product milestone events. Number seven, reduced team capacity because now you have either lost some workers or you have to had some layoffs, some downsizing. Or is it number eight, new remote collaboration requirements? Are you mostly working remotely along with your peers? Number nine, supply chain disruptions that are hard to overcome. Number 10, are you seeing changing competitive landscape, either new competitors or less competitors, but bigger types of companies now that you're competing against? This is all the different things that you could see. So tell me in the chat which of these you're actually seeing, because most organizations are seeing multiple of these, not just one. So all of this and all of these things that you don't control and often were completely unanticipated, here are some of the ripe conditions for agile and lean agile methods to be adopted. Because lean agile methods allow you to start trying different dynamic type of practices and make sure you're testing so that you can continue to add or remove processes that are needed to maintain business continuity at the same time that you're also improving and or implementing new practices that you didn't have before that now are sorely needed because of changing conditions. These are all things that you want to achieve by being able to adopt lean, agile processes and practices. And another study that was actually done by PMI, published in 2008, here are the advantages of anyone that has begun implementing agile methodologies. Most organizations are reporting they're seeing 29% cost reductions, along with 91% better schedule, 97% better productivity, 57% improvement on quality, and 400% higher customer satisfaction and improved customer experience, and 470% better ROI. These are all things that happen over time once an organization begins to boost its agility by implementing lean agile methods. And another study is that when you're a large organization, like a multinational corporation that may have multiple locations across markets and maybe a few thousand or tens of thousands of employees around the world, it's going to be a lot harder to actually be able to scale agility across your entire organization. And what most people that are that big, whether it's a multinational organization or even a federal government contractor that is big, a large government contractor, or even a federal agency, when they are large enough, they're going to have this challenge of trying to figure out how to scale the agility throughout their entire organization. So a particular framework kind of breaks down that agility needs to happen across three different layers. And these layers all have to be implemented at the same time across the entire business or the entire organization. At the first layer, you have delivery, product delivery. Second layer is product portfolio. And the third layer is the business strategies, the strategic side of the business. And all three layers, you have to work hard at implementing lean, agile methodologies. And here's the meaning of each one of these layers. So the whole point about whether or not you're going to start in one of these layers, the point is that you're not going to reap all those benefits and the advantages that I spoke about earlier until you're able to really scale agility across all three layers. And you're better off beginning to implement lean, agile methodologies and practices across all three layers of the business as you start. And you're doing this through business transformation. And this is the reason why in the second half of 2020, when organizations were already trying to recover, there was a digital fast forward because many organizations were actually implementing and accelerating digital transformation initiatives that they were sort of like dragging their feet on because they realized that that's what they needed in order to increase agility within their organizations. And anyone who's done business transformation knows that it's a long-term approach to making changes and changing the way you collaborate, the way you work, and the way work gets done within our organizations. But it always, along with any kind of business transformation, it always starts with people, the people and the culture. Then you move on to processes and systems that need to be improved. Make sure you keep the stable processes in place as you also start implementing new dynamic processes, and that you're applying all of this not just to one product, but over time, product by product, you spread it across your entire product portfolio. And that is the only way you're going to get to those benefits, including higher ROI, or in the terms of publicly traded companies, higher profitability within the organization, because you become more efficient. You focus on continuing to improve your cash flow at the same time that you're also figuring out how to realize more profit, service a lot more customers with the same people, and do cost reductions in order to get to much higher ROI and higher profitability. So now that we understand the current situation as to what's driving all of this boosting of agility to get to a higher level of resilience within organizations, let's talk about the 5 steps that you really need to actually start boosting agility within your organization. And this has to do with all 3 layers: at the product delivery layer, the product portfolio layer, and then at the business strategy layer as well. So we're going to talk about these 5 different steps, and I'm going to list them here so that we're going to cover them in more deeper detail as in what follows in this discussion. So just listing them 1 through 5 here, this is what they are. Number 1, scale, agile, and lean implementation. In other words, you're actually implementing both lean and agile methodologies. Number 2, do your agile planning and DevOps, which means that now you're moving to product development and product planning and using lean agile methodologies. And then number 3, portfolio agility, which means you're implementing lean agile methodologies and applying them to analyze and manage your entire product portfolio. Number 4, full value stream agility, which means that now you need to start understanding value from your customer's point of view and how it changes outside of your control, because you can still maintain the same quality and the same level of throughput, but often buyer behavior changes because their perception of value changes over time because of factors that you don't necessarily control. And often you need to make sure you respond accordingly, so you're offering the right value to the right customers at the right time. And then the 5th step is sense and seize opportunities, realizing that whenever there's any significant changes in the market, whether it's a buyer behavior or different competitors, new competitors, or anything else that is part of your business ecosystem, you're going to sense those changes and figure out what opportunities those are rising and make sure you seize those opportunities from a business point of view. And this has to do with continuing to deploy your business strategy to continue to grow. So these are the 5 steps, and we're going to talk in more deeper detail about them. So let's get into step 1. Step 1, as I mentioned, is about scaling agility and lean methodology implementation. And that is the first layer. And most organizations start by deploying this in the way they analyze products and the way they need to be improved, and then implementing and how they implement, design, and develop products, and how they test those products to make sure that they have a high product to market fit. This is step 1, and they can start applying it to one product, then move on to a different product until they cover the entire product portfolio that's currently in market. A typical agile process is pretty simple. It's small teams working together to be able to keep up with work that needs to be agreed upon, and the scope of the work is all spelled out in the sprint backlog. And then work that is in the queue to be done at some point in the future is the product backlog. And then what's not shown in here is when you're doing product portfolio agility, you also have portfolio backlog. And even at a higher level, at the strategy level, you have a business strategy backlog. These are multiple backlogs that you need to be deployed over time across multiple teams that are executing on these tasks concurrently. And they have to line up the people, the skills, their talent, and the velocity of those teams may differ. And you need to make sure that they stay aligned as the business continues to operate. So in the product development, in the step 1, it's all about developing this when you're developing and then testing your product in the market to make sure that you're getting feedback from customers or prospective customers before you decide when is the right time to launch and whether or not your product has achieved a high product to market fit. And we're also going to talk about 5 different companies that actually are examples, great examples of being early adopters of lean agile methodologies that we're going to talk about next. And here's the first one, Moderna. Moderna was actually started in 2011, and they went public pretty quickly because within a couple of years, they raised enough money, they went IPO, and their mission from the very beginning was to create vaccines using this messenger RNA platform for illnesses that existed like heart illnesses and heart disease, oncology, and other rare diseases. That was their original mission. They got started in 2011, went public, and by 2015, they had already adopted lean agile systems, cloud-based platforms that allowed them to do a lot of modeling before they would start designing different types of vaccines based on this messenger RNA platform that they would then go into clinical trials. And that was basically all of that was tracked, and all the metrics were tracked using cloud-based, web-based applications that were available to all of their employees, all of their workers, so that they could actually begin to innovate. And the result is that very quickly they grew. And actually in April of 2020, they announced that they were going to actually use the same platform, the messenger RNA platform, to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. And they were very successful because they were only 2 weeks after Pfizer announced that they had come up with a vaccine by October of 2020. They were within a couple of weeks from Pfizer, and both of these companies used the same platform, the messenger RNA platform, to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. So Moderna was very successful in scaling. And what people are saying now, because they're still continuing to innovate, now they're talking about that the next iteration will be actually making a single vaccine that actually can cover COVID-19 and also the flu, with a single dose, be able to have a vaccine for the flu and also for COVID-19. And analysts are saying that given their track record, a market cap has risen quite a bit, and they're expected that by the end of the year, their market cap would have reached $1 billion. And that, I think, will have them ready to start deploying their vaccines globally, not just in North America. So step 2, Step two is agile planning and develop. And actually, I want to point out both of these steps, steps one and step two, that I'm covering are now part of that product delivery layer, the first layer that I spoke about earlier. And in here, not only are you developing and testing your product before you launch, now you're moving into actually ideating and doing a lot of concept testing on possible new products or possible new significant improvements, new functionality, new features to existing products. And you're doing this and actually estimating and forecasting revenue, cost structure, and ROI. And you may be doing this multiple times to actually do some modeling to make sure that you can actually ensure that you predict the probability of the right outcomes. Here's another company, Lego. Lego Digital Solutions began implementing scaled agile, lean agile methods in 2015. And that's what allowed them to unleash what they call systematic creativity, which resulted in improved employee morale because everybody is now feeling like they're actually contributing to the company's objectives, more accurate estimates as to when things are going to get done and launch into market, and more predictable outcomes. And they also achieve, by the way, the cost reductions that I spoke about earlier by requiring or needing less managerial overhead because now they have self-organized and self-managed teams that were working worldwide on the next iteration of Lego products. And this is actually how the introduction of the Lego movies, which you might have seen if you have kids, new products that were created based on the Lego legacy of products. So step number three, portfolio agility. And now this third step is now the beginning of, we're getting into that second layer, which is the product portfolio layer. And that product portfolio layer entails being able to figure out how you're going to fund any future work that you have or any new work, and how you're going to actually implement the business development initiatives that you need in order to actually realize the ROI that you're looking for. And this is all part of that second layer, which is product portfolio. And here's another example of another successful company, FedEx. FedEx began implementing lean agile methods in 2013. And this is what actually, they were very successful in keeping up with changing demands worldwide due to the impacts and opportunities of COVID-19 by boosting their business agility. So think about it. You're operating and all of a sudden in March or April of 2020, you couldn't get any flights out because economies were shutting down and no transnational flights and transnational flights were going on at all. International travel came to a screeching halt almost overnight. And that meant that, FedEx could not deliver or make shipments across markets, across borders. So they had to very quickly scramble and figure out, how are they going to make up for the lack of business when they couldn't be carrying things across borders very easily via air. And that basically got together and started working on all these different layers of the company and figure out how to actually start capitalizing and continuing to operate their business. For the most part, they were able to continue to do domestic shipments and domestic deliveries through their ground and other things that they could still do while even economies were shutting down in different ways, but also allow them to start figuring out how to recover and get back up to where they were before the pandemic. Before that, just let me give you a clue. FedEx operates in 220 countries, and these 220 countries where they operate represents 98% of the global gross domestic product. Annual sales before the pandemic were around $70 billion, and they have about 500,000 employees around the world. Well, post-pandemic, they were able to actually make quick changes and make quick decisions about what they were going to focus on. And they were able to successfully deliver over 2 billion face masks around the world. And they also operated over 9,600 humanitarian aid deliveries, including the deliveries of the first COVID-19 vaccines in US. And that equated to about being able to deliver more than 55 kilotons of personal protective equipment around the world, and delivering food and water and other necessities when economies had shut down. And the reports, if you look at where they're at today, as of first quarter of this year, FedEx is now reporting that their business-to-business revenue is back up to the way it was at the end of 2019. But now they're seeing a lot more e-commerce than ever before. And that's because not just most of us are consuming more and buying online. We're also seeing that because most of us are actually working remotely and working from our remote office or home office or small office, which behaves a lot like consumer markets. Corporations are now providing supplies, office supplies, and other things that are needed for employees who are now working remotely or working from their home or remote office when they didn't have that model before. And so that's also given a rise in e-commerce work that is basically more like small businesses that is rising. And that is still being maintained even now, as many of us are still working mostly remote rather than working out of an office. Step 4, full value stream agility. Well, this is also part of that second layer, this product portfolio layer. And it's about understanding how to actually deliver continuously full value stream and making sure that as the perceived customer value changes, you're coming in and looking as to how you can actually deliver that new value that your customers or even prospective customers are looking for, and figuring out from there how to identify the right opportunities, the right markets, and the right segments that they should be servicing so that they can actually start reaping the benefits of realizing that new business, because it's part of business development. And that may be figuring out how to repackage your current products, how to bundle them differently, how to price them differently, how to offer different benefits that now are perceived as higher value to customers. But also it may be about figuring out how to do different improvements than the currently planned improvements to products so that you can now repackage them and offer them to the right customer at the right time and offer the right value at the right time to those customers. So there's a lot of planning in that, and value, you need to track that from the minds of your target customers so that you can then figure out what new value you need to figure out how to deliver over time through your portfolio. And part of that means that you need to now figure out when is the right time to launch, when is the market ready for a new type of product or a new bundle of products that you're selling to deliver that value when the market is looking for it. And that is about planning your launch so that you can get the right outcomes and have more predictable outcomes from your product launches. Cisco is another company, and Cisco began implementing their lean agile methodologies in 2015. And as a result, they have now achieved less defects, boosted efficiency in their business because they can actually keep up with higher demand with the same resources, same tools, and improved employee satisfaction because less workers have to work overtime to fix defects that are found by customers out in the field. And now they're trying to figure out how to put out those fires. And often also some of those defects have led in the past to product recalls. And now the employees are scrambling to figure out how to quickly recall and replace those products so they don't lose their customers and keep their customers happy. So all of this is basically what they reap the results. And here's some of the numbers. They were able to reduce or improve their time to market by 30%, decrease critical and major defects found in the field by 40%, and achieve a 16% decrease in defect rejected ratio, and also achieve a 14% improvement in defect removal efficiency. And because of that, much better employee satisfaction because they're not working overtime like they used to. So that's the good news about how Cisco has achieved cost efficiencies, but also being able to keep customers happier, improve the customer experience, and improve the delivery and the quality of the delivery for their products. Step 5, sense and sense opportunities. And step 5 is part of that third layer, which I spoke about earlier, which is the business strategy layer. This is about making sure that everything within the organization you're working on understands what is the current unique value proposition that needs to be continued to be delivered as you continue to improve on that value proposition for the future so that you can continue to retain and capture new customers that are looking for different value. And that is about understanding that whenever there's any changes, significant changes in the market, and that can be either a change in buyer behavior, or it can be a rising new customer segment that is now there in your market, or different competitors, new competitors, disruptors in your market, or any significant changes impacting your business ecosystem, that you're able to identify opportunities and then figure out what value you need to deliver in order to seize those opportunities and turn them into business value. And therefore, also, as I mentioned, it's not just one of these layers that you're working at any one time. You have to work on all 3 layers concurrently and figure out how to create alignment between all these multiple small teams that are all continuing to work together, and like cogs on a watch, a mechanical watch, that need to be working together in order for that watch to be accurate and precise. They all need to be aligned, and that's what management is doing, is having transparency and visibility across everything that's happening across all 3 layers at the same time, to make sure that they are aligned, that all the work that's being done remains aligned with each other to get the right business outcomes. And that means that often you need to assign the delivery layer to the right activities, ensure that the portfolio layer is working on the right task about discovery and the current improvement of current products. And then obviously also the other thing would be about making sure that your portfolio continues to be small enough to be manageable with the same resources, so that you continue to prune your portfolio and take away any products that are just not achieving what they should be achieving, withdraw them from the market as you're introducing new products into market. And that it's a continuous process. It's a life cycle of things that happens over time as to how you continue to align all 3 layers through your organization in order to boost the agility. Here's the final company that I want to talk about. And this is actually by far the largest winner of 2020, Zoom Communications. And what this is showing here is a comparison of the market cap that Zoom Communications achieved back in April of 2020, once COVID-19 was announced and economies were shutting down, and most of us were needing to now work from home or work remotely and have a way to still communicate with our teams, even as we were working remotely. And it shows here, compares the market cap of these 7 largest airlines in the world with the market cap for Zoom Communications alone. And what it showed is that Zoom alone had a market cap, achieved a market cap much higher than all 7 airlines put together. And this was in April of 2020. And look at why. By the end of 2019, Zoom had about 10 million users. March came through, most of us were now working from home, and that number rose to 200 million users. And by the time it came to April, those users peaked to 300 million. And over time, since, Zoom has now been converting users from using their free trial model into paying customers. And that's why this gap grew so quickly. If you look today, Zoom Communications has lost about half of that market cap that they had at the peak. But that's a pretty good peak because they peaked at around $50 billion. So that means that even today, they're still worth $25 billion. That's their current market cap. What that means is that they're actually funded to continue to improve their product. And actually, Zoom today is a tool that is used by most agile teams that are out there when they're all trying to work remotely and continue to do agile activities, and still having to communicate, even though they're not co-located, because most everyone's still today working remotely. And Zoom is one of these leading applications that most of us are using for not just video communications, we're using it for messaging as well as file transfer. This is the strength of Zoom. It's become a unified communications tool that doesn't require a lot of maintenance and support, or doesn't require an IT department to support, because there's no coding required. You can actually create breakout rooms in real time. A team can break out into multiple small teams in real time and come back together and see where they're at. So they can be doing this on a daily basis and throughout to make sure that they remain aligned in whatever work is being done. So much of the success for Zoom is that it wasn't only adopted for typical video communication tools. It was actually adopted also by many organizations that now were forced to figure out how to continue to operate with their agile teams when they were no longer co-located. Now they're working remotely. And Zoom allowed them to do this in a seamless way. And the other invention of lean agile methodologies, specifically Scrum, is the invention and the introduction of Kanban boards, which are very sophisticated to-do lists, as opposed to having Post-its like many of us do when we have to-do lists. We put tasks on different Post-its. We now can create this on a wall or a whiteboard or any space where there is, and start creating columns that basically represent work to be done, work in progress, and work that is done. That is the simplicity of the Kanban board, and you can actually have any small team or any team follow this, so they can actually start tracking and reporting progress of the work that they've been assigned. And there are different types of tools. Many of them are now web-based, cloud-based, that you can turn on, require zero coding to actually implement and change. And the same teams that are actually turning on these tools can now manage and organize the Kanban boards the way they want, with the tasks that they're looking to do, agree upon the work, and then start executing on the work, and then tracking and reporting and monitoring the progress of their work once they go into implementation. This is the beauty of Kanban. So to summarize, we talked about the 5 different steps and how these 5 steps apply to the 3 layers of how a business or an organization can become more agile. We spoke about scale, agile, and lean implementation. And the second step, agile planning and DevOps, are all part of that product delivery layer. Steps 3 and 4, portfolio agility and full value stream agility, apply to the product portfolio agility layer. And step 5, sensing and identifying changes that create opportunities and seizing those opportunities, is part of the business strategy layer. So this is a summary of what we covered today. So for those of you who are in either the trap state or the bureaucratic state or even the startup state that we spoke about earlier, here is my advice. If you want to really reap the benefits of becoming more resilient, you need to boost agility within your organization. And if you want to boost agility and resilience within your organization, the best time to start was 7 years ago. The second best time to start is now. And that's my advice to you. So here's a little more information about, before we get into Q&A, I want to talk about this announcements. BoldPM Academy, there's more information if you follow the short link at the bottom of this slide. If you want to set up a free discovery call with me to discuss your current situation and you're looking to boost your product agility, but you're having some challenges, reach out to me, email me, and let's talk about setting up a time when we can talk about your current situation and at least provide you some options and maybe state how I can help you. Here's a little bit more about my company and what we do. And here is my contact information. And I think right now we're ready for Q&A. And I would like to actually start with any of the questions that have already been shared in the chat. So one of the questions that I see here is people are saying, what is the best Kanban board for us to use? Well, I can say that right now, Kanban tools and Kanban boards are springing up and have been springing up for a while. And I don't think that there's really right now one leading tool. There's a lot of different tools I have started, like Trello and other type of Kanban tools that are web-based and very easy to use. The issue is that they're pretty much standalone Kanban boards. In other words, when you need to deploy across all three layers, you're talking about definitely multiple Kanban boards. And usually, if it's a large company, it's not just a few, it's actually maybe a few hundred Kanban boards, because you might have a few hundred small teams working across the three layers of your business. And that means hundreds of Kanban boards that you need to actually start aligning and looking and identifying the interdependencies of the work being performed across all three layers, so that you can actually start managing how well aligned your teams are working and how to remain aligned over time as you are continuing to make adjustments and implement and replanning and implement and replanning and implementing. You're doing continuous readjustments as you need to because of changes and because of things that you're observing in the marketplace. So because of that, right now, I haven't really seen any tools that are complete. I know they're becoming more and more sophisticated, but I think it's a highly fragmented market, and you just need to figure out, which one, evaluate and figure out which one works. I would say what you want is you want the following attributes. You want a tool that can be that is easy to use, requires zero coding for you to custom or for teams to customize and start making the right changes and creating baselines and then go into implementation very quickly without requiring some IT work order to be performed in order before they actually work and get started by any teams. You want to be able to quickly set up and tear down boards, because that's what you're going to be doing eventually when you go into implementation. And you might go into sprints and make sure that once the sprint or iteration is done, you don't make any changes until the next sprint or iteration is about to start, and that you may need to have significant changes between one sprint to another whenever a higher level type of change is needed, like something happening in the market and now deploying a slightly different approach to the way you're deploying your business strategy. These are all things that are part of trying to figure out how to select the right tool. I would say Kanban boards need to have ease of use is key. No code changes, the changes that require no coding, zero coding whatsoever, so that your resources don't have to be technical or have a master's in IT in order to be able to make the changes to your tools. You want to make sure that any team can make the changes at the right time when they need to do so. And of course, the other thing is you want to make sure that at least they can be shared and the collaboration and the analytics are available to anyone who's looking to figure out where you're at. And you can get the heat maps implemented and all the dashboards that you need in order for you to get the right analytics and the right implementation of the dashboard that you're looking for. So these are the kind of things that you want to be looking for when you're looking for a Kanban tool that can be shared across your entire organization. I hope that answered your question. And another question was about the case studies that I went through. and whether or not I have these are documented. So the answer is yes, these case studies are documented. And in the post-event page that I mentioned earlier that I have available, I will make those available to you so that there will be links where you can actually view more details regarding any of these 5 companies that I mentioned earlier. And you can, come up with more information and get deeper into what they've achieved and how they achieved it, and the kind of practices when they started. All of this is information that is documented, and you'll have that as free resources available on the post-event page. Now, how do you get access to the post-event page? Well, you can get access in any of these ways. Number one, you signed up on my pre-event page, and you already received information about how to attend and how to be here today. That's the first one. You're all going to get a link to my post-event page because you already pre-registered, and I can send you an email with that information after the live session and when the video is ready. You can also email me at hector@boldpm.com, which is in this slide, and let me know you attended the session, and I will send you the post-event link as well. Or the third way is you can follow the short URL here, linked.in/hcastillo, and that is my LinkedIn profile. Connect with me and send me a connect invitation saying you attended this particular session or that you viewed this video, and I will send you also the post-event link that has more details. It has information, the highlights of today's discussion, and free resources that you can access, in addition to the case studies and where you can find more details about the case studies, the 5 companies that I spoke about earlier. So I hope that answers your question, and hopefully that'll be all the information you need. And if that doesn't cover, just reach out to me and let me know, hey, I have a question regarding something else. You can also contact me on any of these methods, email or via LinkedIn, to set up a free discovery call if you need help and you're looking to boost agility and productivity within your organization. Reach out to me. Let's talk. Let's figure out what your challenges are and what are your options and how I may be able to help you in overcome those challenges that you're facing today in trying to boost agility within your organization. I don't see any other questions, so I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, and I hope to see you at another future talk sometime soon. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your event.